In South Florida, pristine beaches and crystal blue waters are just things that we take for granted. But last summer, an outbreak of a dangerous toxin sent shockwaves through the local economy and raised new questions about the future of Florida's water. Florida's Treasure Coast is known for its natural beauty, but last summer, the scenic coastline became the backdrop for an environmental crisis.
A state of emergency across parts of southern Florida.
A toxic algae invasion is making the water unswimmable there.
Green, slimy, smelly, and flat-out dangerous invasion.
Some people along the Treasure Coast blame water from Florida's biggest lake.
The problem stems back to Lake Okeechobee. Despite its size, Florida's largest lake is very shallow, with average depths of only 9 feet. So when it rains, the lake has to be drained to keep from overflowing. The excess water is flushed outward through the St. Lucie River, where along the way it picks up nutrient runoff that creates toxic algae known as cyanobacteria and carries it outwards to coastal communities like Stewart. Mary Radabaugh is the general manager of Central Marine, a local boat storage and hauling business in Stewart. The algae outbreak last summer forced her to close down.
We could no longer haul boats because the thickness of the mat was like 8 inches thick, so the straps would no longer go through for us to be able to haul.
In nearby Jensen Beach, Pastor Guy Calvert of the Jensen Beach Christian Church was forced to end a 100-year-old tradition of baptizing parishioners in the St. Lucie River after it was deemed unsafe for swimming.
For a century, we've been baptizing. A very important part of our religion is that baptism. And now, because of the pollution, because of the algae, because of the phosphorus, the nitrates, we can't do that.
Deborah Drum is the Martin County Ecosystems Manager, a job that put her at the center of the crisis a year ago, when the smell of the algae alone was enough to force most everyone in Martin County to stay away from the water.
As it accumulates and it starts to decompose, the Microcystis aeruginosa starts to release a toxin as it dies. And the smell is horrific. It is the worst combination of odor that you could ever imagine.
Drum attributes the algae outbreak of 2016 to 3 key factors.
You need high nutrients, you need fresh water, and you need high temperatures.
The massive rainfall totals and scorching weather of summer 2016 created a perfect storm of fresh water and high temperatures. But where did the nutrient runoff come from? That question has raised a new debate. Dr. Larry Brand is a professor at the University of Miami Rosenstiel School of Marine and Atmospheric Science and one of the nation's leading algae experts. He says that most of the nutrient runoff can be traced back to a major industry.
My argument is if you want to get rid of these blooms, you've got to get rid of that nutrient source, which is primarily, not completely, but primarily those sugarcane fields.
The majority of the sugar fields that Brand is referencing are owned by U.S. Sugar Corporation. Earlier this year, Senate President Joe Negron, a Stewart resident, introduced Senate Bill 10, a proposal to buy a large parcel of U.S. Sugar's land south of the lake for a reservoir to store the excess water. In the weeks leading up to a vote on the bill last month, we reached out to U.S. Sugar for an interview. The corporation declined our request. Instead, they referred us here, to the small farming community of Pahokee on Lake Okeechobee's southern shore, and its former mayor, J.P. Sasser.
We are blamed for the algae, and that could not be further from the truth.
U.S. Sugar is the primary employer here in Pahokee.
See the train? That's U.S. Sugar train going right there, carrying all that to Clewiston.
And as a result, the working-class farming town formed an unlikely alliance with the large corporation in an attempt to save jobs.
We have been taking one hit right after the other. We've already had 3 sugar mills close, so really all we've got left right now is agriculture, and it's made strange bedfellows.
The backlash from the sugar industry ultimately forced Negron to compromise. The reservoir will now be built primarily on state-owned lands rather than U.S. Sugar's land, and will only be 2/3 the size of the original proposal.
I think we've really accommodated nearly all of the concerns that are legitimate that have been brought up by individuals and businesses and others that are affected.
Still, scientists are skeptical about the reservoir's ability to solve the problem.
It will have a small effect. I mean, it'll have the positive effect in that by buying up that land, you take a certain amount of agricultural land and convert it back to an aquatic habitat. So you'll stop generating the nutrients.
Meanwhile, residents along the coast are staying cautiously optimistic, but bracing for the worst.
I don't think we can go another summer. with a discharge like that. I don't think my community can take it.
Although the Florida legislature approved the $800 million to build the reservoir, the plan still needs an additional $800 million from the federal government in order to move forward. If the project does not get those funds by December of 2019, the land will go back to being used for its original purpose and the reservoir will not be built. One thing's for certain though, no matter what happens in Congress, Florida's water crisis is far from over. For UMTV, I'm Oliver Redston.